Welcome back, everybody. A new study shows that teens treated for pelvic inflammatory disease, or PID, are at a higher risk for subsequent sexually transmitted infections. Researchers at Johns Hopkins Children's Center warn the current method of treating PID with a prescription and a brochure is not enough. Joining us now to talk about this study is Dr. David Plourde, Assistant Professor of Obstetrics and Gynecology at the Naval Medical Center in San Diego. Thanks so much for being here, Dr. Plourde.
My pleasure, Nancy.
First of all, what is PID? I see that you have a visual aid for us.
Indeed. PID stands for pelvic inflammatory disease, which is basically an infection of the lining of the uterus and up and out through the oviducts or fallopian tubes into the surrounding tissues. It typically starts as a sexually transmitted infection, most often chlamydia, sometimes gonorrhea, but that typically just causes a cervical infection and a vaginal discharge. And if a young woman comes in, she's often treated with antibiotics, end of story. However, because that can sometimes be asymptomatic and she has no idea that she's caught an STD, that she doesn't seek treatment, and then the infection spreads up into the uterus and tubes, and that's what PID is.
Okay, this can be a serious infection, and this study looked at inner city kids in Baltimore, and it found that once they had this infection, they were also extremely vulnerable to another infection. Can you talk about why that is?
Indeed, it's really unfortunate, but it makes a lot of sense that once the cervix has been damaged, if you will, from a prior recent infection, it's less able to present a barrier to subsequent infection. So also the behaviors that led to the original PID are the same behaviors that'll lead to her getting another or recurrent sexually transmitted infection. So the deck is really stacked against a young woman, unfortunately, once she gets PID.
And what are the consequences of repeated infections?
Unfortunately, as much as this infection can be simply mild abdominal pain, even so vague that a young woman might think it's just indigestion or gas, as silent as it can be silently, unfortunately, destroying her fallopian tubes or her oviducts that allow the egg to get into the uterus for fertilization for future pregnancy. So obviously the concern there is she'll be infertile for life. Others, they're fertile, but the tubes are kinked or diseased by the old infection, and then the pregnancy lodges in the tube. That's an ectopic or tubal pregnancy, another real unfortunate consequence, if you will, of old pelvic inflammatory disease. And for others yet, they can live a life of misery with chronic pelvic pain, and that's due to adhesions that formed as a result of the infection.
A lot of problems involved with this.
Indeed.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how we can use this information from the study to improve treatment for these patients.
Certainly. The treatments we've been giving, as you said, we've been giving prescriptions for antibiotics and a brochure on safe sex, and that obviously hasn't been working. We don't need to improve on our antibiotics. That's not the issue here at all. We need to make this a teachable moment. It's sort of like a police officer pulling someone over for speeding might say something like, you know, the last person I pulled over going this fast, we had to get him out with the jaws of life. Being pulled over for speeding is a real teachable moment. I'll bet that person never forgets that word or that message from that cop. We also, as providers, should take this moment and say, you know, I know it's just a vaginal discharge to you and some abdominal pain, and we're going to take care of you, but try not to let this happen again. And we should do more than just say safe sex. I mean, there could be some underlying issues, domestic violence, abuse, low self-esteem, things that have led her. Maybe she thinks the only way to be attractive to boys is to give them sex. There's some really good counseling we can do for them, and this might be that very, almost a blessing, a window of opportunity for her.
Okay, so very important to teach these kids that this can be a lifetime of trouble for them.
Absolutely, Nancy.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. David Plourde from the Naval Medical Center in San Diego.
When you think health, think IRU.